And I think that's one of the reasons why burnout is so hard to identify, because you can have so many symptoms, right? You can have those neck tension, muscle pains, headaches, migraines, brain fog, stomach issues, right? We don't necessarily associate those with burnout or stress for that matter, chronic stress, but it all goes hand in hand.
Since I moved to Costa Rica, my life has changed a lot. And one of the biggest things is the removal of stress in my life. I have a pretty chilled out existence here now. In the morning, I go to the beach with my dogs and I swim in the ocean. I come back and I probably do a workout or yoga in my garden with all the beautiful jungle trees around me. Sometimes there's sloths in the trees and monkeys and parrots and toucans. It is a pretty blissful existence, but it wasn't always that way. You probably are aware that I spent 25 years as a police officer in the UK, and at times I was severely stressed out. In fact, in my last role, I suffered really badly with burnout, although I didn't even know what it was at the time. I was completely sleep deprived. I was mentally and physically exhausted on a daily basis. I was completely stressed. I was living off of sugary snacks and high energy drinks to get myself through the day. And I would describe how I felt on a daily basis as completely frazzled. Things got really bad and I didn't realize how ill I was until it was too late. This is why today I'm really pleased to present to you an interview I did with Connery, who is a burnout recovery coach, because this is something I feel really passionate about. She was a corporate accountant for over 20 years, very successful, and she herself experienced burnout. As a result of that, she retrained as a health coach, and she now helps people that were in the same position that she was 4 years ago. Have a listen to this interview, and if you're experiencing burnout or you're maybe on the brink of it, because quite often a lot of us are and we don't even realize it, she will give you some real good tips on how you can address it. And it's also really interesting to hear her story. I always find that when we listen to people's stories, that's when we learn the most. So I will hand you over to Michelle. So before we begin, if you could just share a little bit about yourself and what your expertise is in burnout.
Sure. Well, before becoming a burnout recovery coach, I was an accountant for 25 years in the corporate world. And in my last job, I suffered severe burnout. It was actually the day that the pandemic kind of went full blown in Ontario, Canada, and we went on lockdown was when I actually realized or admitted that I was burnt out. And that really was my first step to recovery. And from there, I had a whole pile of things I realized, that I needed to move on from my career. I needed to do something different and reconnect with who I was. And that's sort of how I started on the path to becoming a coach, was this massive burnout. And in hindsight, it wasn't just that one incident. It had been growing for several years. I'd been burnt out at a previous job, but it just wasn't as bad as what hit me in March 2020. So.
Yeah, because we often don't even realize we're burnt out, do we?
That's so true. And I honestly, before that happened to me, I really didn't understand what burnout was. And honestly, probably, even if I had, I'm not sure that I would have recognized the symptoms in myself.
Okay, so can you just share with us exactly what burnout is? Because it's a word that we hear quite often, but a lot of people don't actually understand what it means.
Yeah, I know. And that's why it can be so confusing. So according to the World Health Organization, they finally, published something about burnout. And it's really based on a definition that Christine, what's her name? Maslick came up with. And it really encompasses when somebody has the following 3 symptoms. So you're physically and emotionally exhausted. You become really cynical and detached. And then 3, you feel like nothing you do matters. Your performance starts to drop. You feel unaccomplished, even when you're accomplishing things, and you just feel like you have no impact. Now, their definition is around work. but it can extend outside of work as well. And I think we can add a whole pile of other things to what burnout is. But those are the three main core things that somebody who is burnt out will experience. And then there's a whole variety of symptoms. For me, I was always tired, right? Because I thought it was just stress, but I was so emotionally and physically drained that it hurt to almost think, right? Like I felt like I couldn't think anymore. Just getting out of bed in the morning was a struggle. Going into the bathroom to have a shower or brush my teeth took a lot of effort. Never mind going to work. And then I sat there at work thinking, I can't do anything. I can't function. So, it really can be feeling overwhelming. For some can have anxiety, and you do really feel like you're in this pit that you can't climb out of. That nothing you do matters. Doesn't matter what I do, I'm never going to get back to feeling like my old self again. It's like, I know for me, I just kept saying, oh, it's just stress. It's stress. It's the job. It's stressful. This is just part of the job. I have to suck it up. Why am I not, able to work through the night like my colleagues? Like, what's wrong with me? And all of those negative self-talk, kind of like we all have it, but mine went through the roof and would not shut up, would not turn off. And it really made me feel like I was going deeper and deeper into the pit as well.
So do you think that that is a common misconception that people have about burnout, that maybe it's their fault and they're not able to cope and they should just suck it up and get on with it?
Yes, for sure. Because I think it's getting better. Like, it's better than when it was in 2020, because I think more people are starting to talk about it. But I still think there's a whole stigma around mental health as it is. And when you're coming from a profession such as a police officer, an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, whatever, and you're at the top of your game, the last thing you want to admit is that there's something wrong with you, that your brain's not functioning properly. And so you tend to withdraw even more and internalize it and think, oh, it must just be me. I can't talk about this because then other people will think that I can't do my job, that I'm crazy, et cetera, et cetera. And so you withdraw even more, and that actually hurts you more because you go further into burnout.
Yeah, I know from my experience, because I was in the police, you're supposed to be heroic and a leader, and you're there to save everybody else. So when you can't cope with it, it can really affect you, like your confidence, and you feel like you're not able to do your job properly when really the conditions are making it like that.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, there's actually changes that happen in your brain that make it harder for you to cope with just the regular day-to-day stuff. So that's why, like, even brushing your teeth can feel so difficult. And hobbies or things that you used to enjoy don't light you up anymore, don't bring you joy. So you could love your job, but you end up resenting it and hating it. And you can become so emotional as well. Like for me, one minute I'd be angry and the next minute I'd be in tears. And I was just so angry and resentful because I didn't really understand what was going on. And that made me feel like, well, why can't you figure it out? So it was just like kept circling around and around and around. Yeah.
If someone is recognizing some of these symptoms in themselves, what preventative measures can they put in place to stop it going further?
You'll hear a lot of people talk about self-care. Self-care doesn't, in my opinion, help you get out of the muck, get out of that pit. Self-care is preventative before you get to complete burnout, right? And a lot of us get so focused on that job and become a workaholic, and we forget the self-care piece. Now, for me, the one thing that helped was I had to take a break. I had to step out of the work environment because part of my burnout was related to my work environment. It was a very stressful environment. The values of the company and the management above me were different than mine, but I did not know that at the time. And that was causing extra stress. So for me, it was taking time off and working with my therapist to identify what the hell was going on, because I could not see the signs and symptoms myself. So it was I really encourage people to find someone that they can talk to, who's possibly gone through burnout before, because then they're going to understand what you're going through, because you might not recognize it. And sometimes doctors don't even recognize it, unfortunately. But some of the things from there, once I realized what it was, then I was able to start taking steps forward. I actually unplugged from a lot of social media because that's just fueling it. I didn't feel like exercising because that felt like a chore, but some days I would just go stand outside in nature and get some fresh air and sunshine. Trying to sleep, right? Like if I was tired and didn't want to get up, I just stayed in bed and telling myself that was okay because that's what my body needed. And it was really getting back in touch with what my body had been trying to tell me all along. Like sleep when you're tired, take breaks, pee when you got to pee, drink when you're thirsty, and eat when you're hungry. And those, as funny as that sounds, those are all things that I'd forgotten when I was working, right? Because, oh, I got a deadline. I can't get up. I got to finish this deadline. I can't get up and go to the washroom. I can't get up and go get a glass of water because I might be thirsty or go get something healthy to eat because this deadline's more important. So really just hitting that giant pause button and trying to start listening to what my body was trying to tell me.
I totally agree because I practice yoga and I was always walking my dogs out in the woods. I thought that was enough to, balance out all the stress at work, but it didn't really help because I was probably living in the fight or flight response 24/7.
Yeah.
And what I needed to do was address what the root cause was. Doing a yoga practice or walking my dogs in the woods, it was not enough to negate everything that I was experiencing at work. I used to work long shifts and I'd work nights as well. And then I'd kind of recharge on my days off, but then I'd go back. And the moment I went back into work, it was all there again. And no matter how many breathing practices you do,
you can't breathe your way out of burnout. And I think that's one of the misconceptions too, right? That there's a lot of people don't realize that there's internal and external factors that have caused your burnout. And until you start unraveling, because to me, it's like a great big giant ball of Christmas lights and they're all tangled up together. And, you've got to start trying to unravel it and figure out, like you said, what the root cause of your burnout is. And it's usually not one thing. It's usually multiple things. And you have to start addressing those. And, so it can be things like internal things like you're a people pleaser. You're trying to control everybody else. Being me, I was a perfectionist, right? Partly because of my job and partly how I was raised. I had trouble delegating and asking for help, thinking I had to do everything myself. So those are just some of my internal things. And then there's the external as well. So the environment that I was working in, the managers I worked for, the culture, their values versus mine, they were different. And that causes stress and things like that. So really you gotta unwind all of that and figure out what it is you want, what your priority is for your life, and take responsibility for the shit that's yours and let go of the rest, which is not easy when you're used to trying to control everything.
And so when you were at work and you were experiencing this, did you find that you got support from your managers, or was it sort of treated as a kind of problem, that you were a bit of a problem? I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, I would say it's the latter, partly because I didn't speak up. I didn't feel like I could speak up. I didn't think at the time that management would be receptive to what I was going through. It was a stressful point for the organization. And it was a bit of like, this is what it is, suck it up or leave, that kind of attitude. I remember sitting in my mid-year performance review about 5 months before I had my major breakdown in March 2020. And my manager at the time, he was just an interim manager because the previous person had left due to stress or something. We're not sure. He was there one day and gone the next. We're not really sure. But I remember him asking, so Michelle, how do you think it's going so far? What have you achieved yet this year? And my mind literally went blank. And I could not think of a single thing. And in that moment, I was so embarrassed and horrified at the same time. It's like, what do you mean you can't think of anything? You got to think of something, right? That my next response was to have the big, ugly cry. And I couldn't even get a word out. And that manager was, I need to apologize to him for my outburst because I don't think he knew what was coming. He had no clue what was going on because I had not said anything, but he did handle it well in that he let me just cry, and we kind of ended the meeting. And he said, "Okay, do you need to go home, or what do what do you need from me?" And I'm like, "I'll be back at my desk in 10 minutes. I just need to go to the bathroom." But I never really spoke out to them about what it was because I was afraid I was going to be fired if I said anything.
So in your organization, did you have anything like occupational health that you could be referred to? We have,
We
I
yeah,
don't know
we
if
had
it's the
some
same thing.
resources, yeah,
Yeah.
but they weren't the best. Like you could call it was a 1-800 number for support for free counseling and stuff, and I'd used it in another organization, the same service, and I just really did not feel comfortable using it, and I didn't feel that they understood what I was going through. I had more results with my own personal therapist that I found and connected with, and was able to speak to her. And I also felt too like even though those 1-800 services that provide those things for companies, I always felt like, well, somehow somebody at work's going to find out what I'm saying to them. So this was like also my thought. So I was like, no, I want something completely separate. And I worked with her to be able to see what was going on with
Mhm.
with my situation. And it was good to have a third party who was not involved in it and could be, impartial and really help me see what was my shit, what was their shit, and help me make decisions as to whether or not I wanted to continue there or whether it was time to leave. So.
Mhm. Now, are there any personal habits or routines that you have that help prevent you experiencing burnout again?
Yes, for sure. Now that I know my triggers, I mean, I've been working on my limiting beliefs. I understand what values are important to me. And anytime I'm looking for opportunities, I'm making sure those values, first of all, line up. Otherwise, I know there's going to be extra stress. But in my personal life, really, it's like I said, it started off with listening to my body. So for me, it's getting out in nature. I'm always a better version of me when I've spent some time outside every day, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or an hour or more. Now that it's summer here, gardening, things like that. Walking the dog, playing with the cat. For me, spending time with my family, especially my niece and nephew, they've really helped me learn how to have fun and play again. I found that I was very much a one sided individual. I was a workaholic and I did not have any definition of Michelle outside of that. Sure, I was a daughter and an aunt and a pet mom and all of that. But if you ask me what I did for fun, I never had an answer. And so now I'm finding like my life is a little bit more well-rounded. I'm not solely focused on one thing to the detriment of others, always making sure I have fun every day, looking for joy every day, taking time for myself every day, putting myself first, and then helping everybody else, which is really important now because I'm supporting and helping my parents who are now 78 and 81, so which can also be stressful. So, but I know I have to take care of myself first. So eating healthy, drinking plenty of water, exercise or movement. If the word exercise haunts you, then think of it as movement, and just really listening to my body. If I do something, my body goes, I didn't really like that. So I'll try something else, right?
Yeah, I think diet is very important because what I experience, I was eating a lot of sugary snacks. I was drinking a lot of these energy drinks to try and
Hmm.
keep going, especially now when I work nights. And I was just poisoning my body. And I think that actually made it all worse because you get
Yes.
this sort of temporary high and then you crash. And then I also was very sleep deprived, and sleep is really sort of our primary pillar of health. If we don't have
Hmm.
sleep and our body doesn't restore, I think this is why my burnout was so bad because I was operating in a sleep deficit. I was stressed. I was eating a terrible diet, and it just something's got to
Yeah,
give. So,
exactly. Exactly. And I think that's pretty much what burnout tells us is right. It's like you've been abusing your body for so long. it's time to listen. We're going to stop you. Right? Your body can only take so much stress, chronic stress, for so long before something's going to happen to stop you in your tracks and make you do something different. And for me, that was burnout. And I think now, 4 years past that date when that happened, it was the greatest gift that I could have had, because without it, I would have been still in Toronto working probably just for another corporation, burning out again, and maybe something worse happening, like a heart attack or a stroke, or, you just don't know.
And we don't really realize the impact stress has on us.
Mm-hmm.
The mental stress, it manifests in our bodies as well. Because when it happened to me, I didn't realize, as I say, I did yoga, I walked my dogs out in nature, and I actually really wasn't taking care of myself at all, because I just had this chronic source of stress all the time. And it's cumulative. It builds and builds and builds until your body says, no more.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why burnout is so hard to identify, because you can have so many symptoms, right? You can have those neck tension, muscle pains, headaches, migraines, brain fog, stomach issues, right? We don't necessarily associate those with burnout or stress, for that matter, chronic stress, but it all goes hand in hand. I still am dealing with pain in my body from sitting at a desk for 25 years and ignoring my body. But slowly, as I start moving more and like you said, cleaning up my diet, always a work in process. But as I do that, I'm finding I feel better. I have more energy. I'm sleeping better.
So if there was one piece of advice, first of all, this is a two-part question. One piece of advice for someone that's experiencing burnout, and also one piece of advice for someone to prevent it.
So somebody who believes they're already burnt out, the first step, I'm going to give you a two-part answer for that one. The first part is I would encourage people to go to their doctors and get some blood work done and testing done to make sure that you don't have any deficiencies, like an iron deficiency or something else that might be adding to your exhaustion, right? So if your body's already that depleted, you could be low in some important nutrients, and knowing that can help you, start regaining some of that energy quicker. Once you've done that, if everything comes back fine, or you've addressed whatever comes up, then I would encourage you to find somebody who understands what you're going through and talking to them. So whether that's finding a coach, a therapist, or a colleague that's gone through it, somebody who's not going to judge you, somebody who's going to hold space for you, somebody who's going to understand you and help support you. They can't do the work for you, but they can help you see that there is a path out. And I think that was the biggest thing for me when it first hit. I thought, nothing's ever going to change. I'm never going to get out of this when I'm, and that just put me further down. But once I had somebody to talk to who could show me the way and show me the steps. And yes, sometimes it feels like you're taking one step forward and 10 steps back. But she was there to help encourage and support and hold space for me, which is really what helped me start turning things around. So those are the first two. And then, there's a ton of resources out there, and I gave you a list which you can share with your audience. But for me, in the early stages, none of those things would have helped me, because I did not have the energy or the mental capacity to read, listen to a podcast, or anything, exercise. I was too emotionally and physically drained. And I just needed somebody to tell me what the next step for me was, even if it was like this big. To answer the second part of your question, what would you do if you're not burnt out, but you want to try and prevent it? Like, I think if I would go back and tell my 30-year-old self, it's, your job's important, but it's not the be all and end all to your life. Your first priority has to be you, and finding out the things that light you up, figuring out your values. Sometimes we have to reprogram our limiting beliefs that we learned as children, and that could be cultural, it could be from your parents, it could be from school, whatever. But really learning who you are and be you. Be your authentic self. Because a lot of my burnout too was me trying to be what everybody else thought I should be.
So, in your role as a burnout coach, what kind of services do you offer to people that are experiencing this at the moment?
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm doing one-on-one coaching with my clients. So it's usually a 3-month container, 45-minute sessions where we come in and we customize a plan for you to get you on your road to recovery. So really, it's about, for me, getting to know the individual, what they're dealing with, trying to uncover what's caused their burnout, and really just being their coach, their support, the person in the corner cheering them on, leading the way, showing them that it is possible, and helping them figure out what the next right step is. We're not going to solve everything in 3 months, but we're going to solve some stuff, and we're going to take it one step at a time. And once you've done that, we can move on to the next step. And really, it's about prioritizing things and figuring out what's going to get you to where you want to be, and helping you create your own definition of what you think a healthy, balanced life looks like, because it's different for everybody. And I believe that it's all about connecting your mind, body, and soul. And so we work on reconnecting you to those 3 pieces, because for me, all 3 were disconnected. and yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I have a vision of something that I'm planning coming up. What I'm looking at creating a membership for people, where they'll have like monthly support from me and a community support, as well as resources and other tools to help them with the burnout recovery. So that's going to be coming in the next couple of months as well. So.
Yeah, that'd be so good, because I found that I didn't really have anybody to talk to, and nobody could relate to what I was experiencing. I didn't want to voice it at work because it was a sign of weakness. And really, you don't really want to voice it to anybody because you feel that you've somehow failed as a human being. But if you can connect with other people that are going through the same experiences, it can make such a difference. You know, it reassure you that you're human, that you're normal, and then that can lead you on the road to recovery. So I think that would be really wonderful.
You know, I've started to find, like I said, other resources and things that have helped me along the way. But I really believe that putting them all together in one place for people will be very, very beneficial and help them hopefully recover quicker. Because I heard a stat that said, your burnout recovery, it's different for everybody. For some people, it can take up to 18 months or longer. But if you do it with a coach, and support, you can usually cut that time down in half. So if you do it on your own, it might take you 3 years or more. But if you can cut that time down in half by having the support and a coach or a therapist, then you're going to get to your end goal a lot quicker.
People want to find you online. Where can they look for you?
I'm on Instagram right now, at Coach Michelle Connery. I also have Facebook kind of presence, but Instagram is the best place, or LinkedIn. Again, Michelle Connery. You can find me on LinkedIn. Want to provide people with the message that you're not alone. You're not crazy. Burnout is a real thing, and it's okay to ask for help and support, because it's easier when you have a community behind you. You're not alone.
I 100% agree with that. Well, thank you very much. This has been really enlightening, and I feel kind of vindicated about what I went through, because I understand that it happens to a lot of people, and it's not a character flaw on your behalf. Some things we can't control, and we get in situations where it just overwhelms us, and the only way out of it is to stop and reset and try and rebuild your nervous system all over again.
yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And it can be done. I mean, you and I are proof. We both done it, and the hard way. I mean, I did have a therapist at the beginning, but the most of it I did it by myself after I moved. But yeah, it can be done, and it's so much better when you have people you can talk to.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, and we will connect again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Helen. It's been a pleasure.